Okay, I just wanted to show this is kind of a cleaned up view, or a cleaned up version, I guess, of the drawings of the shoe. I feel like I have enough detail now to where I'm ready to start shading. When you start shading, what I suggest doing is just kind of, can you guys see the actual shoes in there? Let me scoot those down. There we go. Going in and just graying down the areas that should be shadowed. So basically what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take any area that's in shadow and I'm just going to cover it in gray. There's quite a bit in here that's gray. I'll maybe mute you and come back to you, but I'm basically just going to gray down areas in shadow. I'm going to color outside of the edge of the line here. So I'm going to gray that down. I'm going to actually just do the shadows on the shoes first, then I'll come back and do the cast shadow. So let me pause you while I go ahead and shade for a minute. Okay, I went in and just grayed the areas that were in shadow. Now you see that the shadows are all kind of like one middle tone of gray. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to kind of amp up the areas that should get a little darker. I'm kind of going against the original kind of direction. I went sideways or diagonal that way. So now I'm going in a like crosswise. Just because I feel like when you do cross hatching, you'll see pencil lines still, but it kind of smooths out the pencil lines and turns them into more just like gray areas. So now I'm starting to gray down any area that's darker. And I have a lot of darker areas. So it's going to take me a while to do this, but I'm going to go in and I'm just going to do like a middle tone to dark gray. If you want to go in when you're doing these dark areas and you want to put in some like really dark areas, like press a little harder in some areas, press a little lighter in other areas, that'll really start to give it some volume where like you can actually look in there and see like, oh yeah, you know, that kind of recedes inside the shoe. That's why there's a shadow, because obviously there's no light, you know, getting inside that area on the shoe. So yeah, like I said, as you go along, if you would just go in and kind of start saying, okay, this is a really dark area. This will have a really dark shadow, so I'm just going to throw one in there. Over here inside the shoe, we start to see some really dark areas happening within those like little like laces or Velcro pieces that go over. So yeah, that's what I'm doing now is just going in and adding those dark shadows. I'll go ahead and just mute it while I add some dark areas, and then I'll talk about lights and cast shadow. Okay, I just wanted to tune back in on this light and shadow project because I've started adding some of these darker dark tones, like within the cavities inside the shoe, under these sort of laces like straps inside the shoe here by the tongue. So after you add sort of like your middle tone gray areas, as you go along, make sure that each shadow is a gradation. You know, it's not just like a dark triangle here. It's a dark corner, and that dark corner kind of fades out into the medium grays. So try to make sure that each area, as you're adding a dark area, some areas are going to be really sharp on one edge, but they'll probably gradate or fade on the opposite edge, okay? So that's the key to creating a shadow, is deciding where there's a sharp line and where there's a smooth, soft line, and where it fades gradually from light to dark. So if you can sort of look at that in your image, let me actually just zoom in on the image and I'll show you some of these areas that I'm talking about. So like see on this little dip inside the bow here, there's a real sharp line where this highlight stops, and there's a dark area right in this cavity. And as that dark area goes over, it gets lighter and lighter and lighter and fades out. Even this tiny little triangle right here, it's not a sharp edge triangle. It's really soft and fuzzy on the edges, and it kind of fades out as it moves over. So noticing those really subtle changes in tone, that is what will help you. Like look at this dark area even. There's a dark triangle here again, but it doesn't have a very sharp edge. It kind of fades out into the light, fades out into the bright white highlight over here. So try and get a grasp on that when you're creating shadows, is those soft, fuzzy edges. Where is it sharp? Where is the edge sharp? And then where is it soft and fuzzy? And if you can sort of recreate that in your pencil lines, you know, kind of do that soft, that fade from dark to light over here. And you know what? Honestly, I haven't developed this one very well. So I'm going to kind of produce that same soft, fuzzy edge that I saw in the picture. You know what? Let me zoom out so you guys can see it too. Sorry, I was zooming in. Okay, so like right here on the toe of the shoe, there's that like soft, fuzzy shadow inside there. And that's kind of what I'm starting to create here. This area is probably a little light. I'm just going to gray down my light area because it's not white. Honestly, what would be really helpful to you guys too is if you could actually print these pictures in black and white instead of color like mine is. And that'll help you to notice what, you know, kind of gray tone you're looking at, what level of gray. So I'm going to go ahead and keep developing these shadows, try and put in my darks on the shoes themselves, and then I'll tune back in for how to create the cast shadow. I forgot to tell you guys something really important. As you start shading on here and you're moving your hand over the drawing, it's going to start to create smears on there. So have a piece of scrap paper under your hand while you're working. Sorry, let me grab a piece of scrap paper really quickly. It doesn't have to be a nice piece of paper. It just can't have pencil on the bottom, otherwise you're going to smear it even more. So have that under your hand while you're shading, and then you'll be sure not to smear. And as you move over, move the paper with you or to different parts. Just always have that paper under your hand to keep your paper nice and neat. Okay, 8th graders, I am going to show you now how to start adding the cast shadow. I have the shadows on the shoes themselves pretty developed. You can see my hand kind of likes to shade on an angle like this. You'll probably find a comfortable angle to shade. Anyway, when I got to the edges, I shaded right outside of the edges, and you can see that on both shoes. And the reason I go outside of the line is because I don't want you stopping short and leaving kind of this choppy white edge within the shoe. I'd rather you just go past and then come in with an eraser and just kind of clean up this edge here. In the last video, I talked to you guys about putting a paper underneath your hand to protect against smearage. You know what, I was drawing at my desk and I wasn't even thinking about it, and I got some smears happening over here. You see how nasty those look? And if you actually look at my hand, you can see like a little bit of like graphite on my knuckles, and that's what it'll do. My hands will pick up some of the graphite and they'll just smear it all around the page, and it'll look really messy. So please make sure you have a scrap paper underneath your hand while you're working. I'm going to get rid of these smudges because hopefully I'm not going to create any more. I'm just going to be really, really careful, and I'm going to have this paper under my hand at all times while I'm working on this project. Sure, it's a little bit more to think about, but I'm telling you guys, you'll save yourself a lot of hassle and a lot of time from erasing smudges all over the page. Okay, so now I'm going to go ahead and add cast shadows. Remember that cast shadows are the shadows underneath the object on another surface, maybe the surface it rests on, maybe just the surface next door. As I go in to add those cast shadows, remember that all shadows are a gradation, okay? There should be a dark area, and it should gradually fade out to a lighter area. In order to make a cast shadow look like a shadow and not a hole, you want to keep it soft and fuzzy and hazy on those edges. See, you don't see a dark line going around the edge of the shadow, so don't put one in your drawing either. The darkest area of this cast shadow actually will have a very sharp dark line, and it's actually directly underneath the shoe. So I guess, again, that's kind of finding that balance. Like, where is the sharp edge of the shadow? Where is the soft edge of the shadow? And if you can kind of, oh, you know what? I think I'm kind of deforming the edge of the shoe. If you can find those areas, if you can identify those areas and see them, then drawing them is just sort of the next step. So, okay, so there's my darkest area under the shoe. As I move over, I'm just actually going to cover this whole cast shadow in like a gray area. I'm trying to go really soft and light on these edges so that I don't create like a really dark edge. If I'm looking really closely at the shadow, it's really dark all through here, and then it's like middle tones through here, and then soft on the edges. So that's what I'm going to try to do on mine. I'm going to be looking back and forth from that image to my drawing, over and over and over again to try and capture what I'm looking at, okay? You don't want to go in and just do like a standard cast shadow that just, looks like whatever. You want to actually look at your image and borrow from the reference image. That's why we have these images. Yeah, that's why they're important, because we need to look at them, okay? I'm going to go ahead and continue to develop this cast shadow, and then I'll go in and show you that one as well. But basically, to get started, like I said, I'm just going to gray down this whole shadow, just cover it in like a smooth gray tone, and then I'll just keep working on creating that gradation, that fade from dark into those medium tones. So this is kind of close to what it'll look like when it's finished, just this one corner. I don't want to do the whole thing because I don't want to keep you sitting here too long. So kind of like that, soft and fuzzy on the edges. It's really dark, really, really, really dark underneath the shoe. And then it kind of fades out as it moves over, okay? So that's starting to look like a cast shadow. Let me finish this and I'll turn you back on. Okay, so I've developed the cast shadow underneath this shoe here. Remember that the cast shadow has to have a dark area where it's like very sharp edge, very, very dark. and then where it gradates out or fades away. Obviously, the far side of the shadow and the cast shadow will be my soft fuzzy side. I shaded right over the lines I had drawn in. After you do that, if you feel like it needs it, mine probably needs it just a little bit. I kind of like the way it looks when it's a little bit imperfect. But if you want to go in and kind of clean up the outline of your shadow, I highly suggest erasing that original line that you drew in to like kind of sketch out the shape that this shadow is going to be. Because then all that will remain is this sort of hazy gray edge that looks very realistic like a shadow, okay? I might want to clean up a little bit more over here later. As you add the cast shadow, what might also happen to your drawing is some areas in here will still need to be darkened. And you'll be like, oh, you know what? This shadow on this side of the shoe doesn't look as dark as it did without this shadow in there. So I highly recommend that after you add the cast shadow to kind of go back in and decide what areas need more darkening because of that shadow being added. Sorry, my pencil, there it goes. I was gonna say it's not working. So I'm gonna darken this area in for sure. And I'll do that later, but I'm just saying that I feel like this whole side of the shoe needs to be a little bit more darker in comparison to the image when looking at the cast shadow next to it. I will also go back in and do the same for the other shoe. I just wanted to show you guys an example. So that's how you take the drawing from start to finish. Just keep adding gray tones until you get some really dark black areas, some white highlights. And yeah, that's pretty much it. Good luck, guys. Okay, 8th graders, this is the last segment of this video I'm gonna do. When you're done with your light and shadow drawing, there should be a very clear sense of light. You should have a shadowed side and a light side, and you should be able to tell when looking at the image where that light source is coming from. I do not mind if you leave lines in like mine has. I'll kind of zoom in there. You can see a lot of lines. Ooh, this camera is really nice. You can see a ton. Anyway, and I don't mind the lines. I'm okay with that. But if you're a really meticulous person and you like to smooth out those lines a little bit more, I want to stop you from blending with your finger. It makes for a really blotchy blend. If you wrap a paper towel, probably at home you have a lot better paper towels than we have here, so it might be a little softer and easier to form and use. But if you use a paper towel, the paper towel will sort of move that graphite across the page and help you remove some of those lines. Be careful because you can over blend with the paper towel to where you get rid of your beautiful gradation and you don't see that fade from light to dark. It just creates all flat gray, which is not cool. If you have a blending tortillon or if you can make one out of paper, you're welcome to use these as well. Remember, those are for the little detailed areas, okay? So you wouldn't want to use that to like blend your entire drawing or something, okay? And then, yeah, if you have any like really little wispy light gray areas you want to create, the blending tortillon is the best way to do that, okay? So that being said, good luck, guys. I know this is a complicated process. It takes a lot of patience, a lot of working in, you know, like backing up. Oh, this is the other thing I wanted to add. You should back up from your artwork when you're working on it. Get, 5-6 feet back, hanging on the wall with some tape, check it out. This is called a gallery view, or honestly, I maybe made up this term. This is what I call a gallery view. If you were walking through a gallery, this is how far away you would view art from. Or in our situation, viewing art hanging in the halls, things like that. When you back up, it sort of clarifies what's working and what's not working. You get a clearer image than when you're 12 inches away from it, constantly looking and, really close up to it. Back away every now and then. You will produce better artwork. Sit there for a few minutes, eat a carrot, have a cup of coffee, gaze at the artwork and critique it yourself. If you're someone that wants to create beautiful artwork, learning to self-critique is the best way to do it, okay? All right, best of luck. I'm out.